The 578th edition of the Four Corners podcast starts right now.
This is the Four Corners podcast.
And that could make a difference. Lawson at the buzzer. Got it! Maybe not. Ty Lawson wins it at the buzzer.
Deep three. And Green rips down the rebound in traffic. 4-on-1.
What a great job. What a terrific job in transition. I mean, you couldn't plan that any better as a coach.
Gets the roll. Here we go. Page has it. Carolina down one. 84-83. Page into the front court with 4 seconds. Page to the rim. Got it! He got it! 9/10 of a second to go. Inbounds. Washington gets it to Warren. His full court shot. No good. Marcus Page baby. Does it for the Tar Heels. Carolina wins it.
Don't force it if you're Goss.
Comes in. Blocked by Meeks. Buried up ahead to Jackson. And he tucks it down for the 5-point lead. Matthews off the mark. And this year, the confetti is going to fall for North Carolina. They're not going to be denied this time. Inside 30 overall. Love, top of the key. Oh! Big time delivery.
Here are your hosts, Josh Marlowe and Anthony Pagnotta.
Hello and welcome in to another live edition of the Four Corners podcast. We are powered by Carolina Electrical Services. Josh and Anthony here with you on a Thursday night. Initially, we thought this would be What If Series Night 1980s edition, but earlier today, Carolina officially released the basketball roster for the upcoming season. So we'll talk about that. Anything that stands out. Luka Bogavac is in Chapel Hill. A lot of excitement around that. The basketball account tweeted that out yesterday. So we'll talk about him making his way to campus. And then we're going to do a mini audio reaction segment where Bomani Jones joined Inside Carolina to talk about, all things Carolina athletics and his media career. And he had an interesting thought and opinion on Hubert Davis that I want to react to because I think he made some valid points. And there was some stuff that I obviously would disagree with as well. We'll get to that a little bit later on in the show. Before we do any of that, though, we start every edition of the pod, as we always do, with the pod thought of the day. And we go to John Wooden for that pod thought, and that thought is, quote, "Do not let what you cannot do interfere with what you can do," end quote. Very reminiscent, very similar to the message that we hear Bill Belichick communicate all the time that's now made its way to Carolina football. Quite simply, do your job. And as long as you do your job, everything else will kind of take care of itself. And I think for Carolina basketball for this upcoming season, they've got to do a much better job controlling the controllables than they did a year ago. I think last year they got so caught up in stuff that they could not do, and that really interfered with what they could do. And a big reason why that team really underachieved pretty much all season long, beginning as a preseason top 10 team, was literally the last team into the NCAA tournament and was gone before Friday at 6 o'clock. So, I think it's a good message, one that pretty much every coach kind of, tells to his team in one way or another, but one that is very applicable for where Carolina is going into a very important 2025-2026 season.
Well, the good news is that they don't seem to have nearly as many limitations as they did last year. You don't have the fact that you lack size. You don't have a poor shooting team. And so I think Carolina overall has less things that are out of their control. I think last year you had things that were out of their control that, there were, it's hard not to focus on that stuff. Like when you don't have the size, it's hard not to focus on the fact that we aren't rebounding well. When you're, lacking shooting, it's hard to, not focus on the fact that we just can't knock down shots from the outside. I think this year it's going to be different because Carolina is going to have all of those elements on the roster. I feel like the one thing that you do kind of wonder is whether or not they're going to have a traditional point guard, a guy that can do everything that they need someone at that position to be able to do. But I do think that, that's still one thing that might be out of their control that they can still overcome. So I think this team, it's really just about taking the right mindset into this season and not worrying about the fact that your head coach is on the hot seat, just controlling everything that you can control game in and game out, which is how you play and, where this season ultimately is going to go. So I think they're, this group will be able to do that probably a little bit better because I do think that they are going to have some more veteran presences on this team that they went out and got in the transfer portal. They've got more size. They've got better shooting. So I trust that this team will be able to control the controllables a little bit better than last year's team.
All right, let's get to the first order of business tonight, which is the roster being set, the roster being finalized. We got roster numbers as well because earlier today, the Carolina basketball program released the official roster for the upcoming season. And before we go through that, I'll read you a quote that Hubert Davis made available to the release on Go Heels when talking about the roster. The head coach said, quote, "I am very excited about this upcoming season and this year's team, led by Seth Trimble and college basketball's current state. Carolina has been fortunate to have multiple accomplished veteran players choose to stay at UNC. Players like Leaky Black, Armando Bacot, RJ Davis, and now Seth Trimble are difference makers for us. Going into the summer, we wanted to get bigger and more versatile to give us the ability to be better on both ends of the floor. And I believe we've done that," end quote. Very thing that's noticeable is he mentioned Seth Trimble by name as the only returning player, which I guess is his way of telling us that this is Seth Trimble's team, and the expectation is for him to be the vocal leader for Carolina basketball, both on and off the floor. What I want to do right now is run through the roster numerically as it was released. So let's do that here really quickly. Colorado State transfer Kyan Evans will wear number 0 for Carolina, his first season in Chapel Hill. Zayden Hyde, who rejoins the program, does so while wearing the number he wore 2 years ago. He'll wear number 1. James Brown, the rising sophomore, he will wear number 2. Incoming freshman Derek Dixon, he will wear number 3. Incoming Virginia Tech transfer Jaden Young, he will wear number 4. Incoming freshman Isaiah Dennis will wear number 5. The son of Carolina basketball head coach Elijah Davis will wear number 6. Senior Seth Trimble, he will wear number 7. Top 10 recruit Caleb Wilson, he will wear number 8. West Virginia transfer Jonathan Powell will wear number 11. Henry Vasar will wear number 13. The Arizona transfer, the Alabama transfer Jared Stevenson, he will wear number 15. Some holdovers that were on the JV squad that were into the bench guys from a year ago. John Holbrook will wear 25. Ryan Smith will wear 32. High Point transfer Ivan Matlakovich will wear 40. And Luka Bogavac will wear number 44. When you see that roster, you look at that roster, on paper or on print, does anything stand out to you? Because I do think it's quite noticeable that Carolina has a lot of guys wearing single-digit numbers. I counted 9 of them, which seems like a pretty big number. But nonetheless, when you look at this official roster, what catches your eye? What catches your attention?
I mean, just how many guys are different from a year ago, how much change this roster underwent this offseason, but it was necessary. We talked about it. You needed to overhaul this roster in order for this group to really take a step forward this year. Again, I think one of the things that we really like about this group is that the size is there. There's no question about that. I mean, you got Vasar at 7 foot. You've got multiple 6'10" guys on the roster with Caleb Wilson, Zayden High back in the fold, James Brown another year, and of course Jaron Stevenson coming over in the transfer portal. So, I mean, all of this, I think, when you look at this roster, this looks like a group. And I didn't even mention Matalakovic there. They don't have his measurables up there just yet. But, I mean, this group is definitely a lot different from last year's group in terms of the areas that they need to have, that they needed to fill. They've done a really good job of that. And so I think coming into this year, you feel really confident in that area. We've talked about the amount of shooters that this team has on the floor. I love the depth at the guard position. I think that's about as deep as any position on this team. And I just talked about all the guys that you have at forward. But I mean, like the guard position, I mean, you're starting Seth Trimble, that's for sure, and you're starting Kyan Evans. But then you've got plenty of guys that you feel like are going to be able to help this team this year, whether it's Jonathan Powell, if he's going to be at the guard position. You can also play, Luka Bogavac at that guard position if you want to. He creates a little bit of flexibility with what he's able to do. But then Jaden Young, love the experience that he brings to the table transferring in from Virginia Tech. Derek Dixon and Isaiah Dennis, both guys that I think could take time to develop. With the amount of depth that Carolina has, they will be afforded that opportunity, but I don't think they're going to need that much time. So that's the thing. Carolina's got the size, they've got the shooting, and they've got the depth on this year's roster. So I like everything about that. That's really the stuff that stands out to me the most.
Yeah, this is your $14 million roster. This is the roster that Carolina put together that they paid a pretty penny for.
Here it is.
And now we got to see the results. We got to see how that translates onto the basketball court. It's noticeable how much bigger this team is and the legitimate size and flexibility that they have this year that they did not have a year ago. And I think they're poised to be a much better shooting team on the offensive end, and a much better, defensive team in the half court, and a much better rebounding team than they were a year ago. And if they're both of those things show up and translate, they're going to be better than they were night in, night out a year ago. I think we still you got to get closer to the season to really kind of identify what we think this team's ceiling is. We kind of talk about it all the time about what the expectation, what the standard is, but I don't know if this roster is poised to live up to that. But I do think this is a roster that is one that's going to be asked to finish top 4 in the ACC, get a respectable seed in the tournament, and win games in March. And whether the price tag was attached to it or not, that was always going to be the case. I do think the price tag, though, does kind of add some pressure for there to be the results that comes with the investment that Carolina has made into the roster. The big news this week is the official arrival of Luka Bogavac, who, we talked, I believe it was last week or it may have been 2 weeks ago now, about him setting an arrival date, which was never an official date. We just knew it was going to be this week because classes do begin in a big way on campus on Monday. So we had to get here to be enrolled and be ready to go to school. But he's here, and it's a pretty big deal when the basketball account tweets about him showing up. And they kind of showed his arrival, showed him in the Smith Center. There was a nice photo of him kind of being directed to the banners, where you see, not just the championships, but all the honored and retired players and just all the things that come with, playing for this program. So I guess what I want to ask is, in the transfer portal era, has there been a player that maybe has garnered more excitement about joining the program in a non-traditional sense, because he is an international pro? He is 21 years old. He's not a high school recruit, but there's been a lot of excitement And then there was just a lot of uneasiness about him going through the process to join the program, from having to get clearance from the NCAA and all that. So in the brief 5 years that we have added players outside of the high school recruiting landscape, has there been a player that has maybe caused as much excitement and uneasiness as we've seen with Luka Bogavac? Because this was a situation that we were monitoring pretty much on a day-to-day basis, because it was very fluid about his timeline getting stateside.
Well, I mean, that's the thing, is that it's just completely different because Carolina hasn't been recruiting international guys. So they haven't run into the obstacles that they've had before. Is he the most anticipated transfer that Carolina has ever gotten? Probably not. I would say that would probably go to a guy like Harrison Ingram. Cormac Ryan was incredibly thought of when he ended up transferring to Carolina, and especially Brady Manick. Brady Manick was a guy that I think everybody thought coming into the program was going to be huge. To even go back to Cam Johnson, that was before we got into the transfer portal era, but he was a guy that, a lot of people looked at and thought he's going to be able to do some big things here. So I wouldn't put him necessarily in that area. I don't know. I mean, from my perspective, I don't even know if he's the biggest guy on this team. I think the guy that everybody is looking at more than anyone is Henry Vasar. Now, I don't know if that's because of the talent level. I think that's more because of the need that Carolina has at the center position. But I do think that it is interesting that it really seems like Vasar is probably the guy that most people are looking towards as the biggest transfer addition, as opposed to Bogavac. The thing that's interesting is with him, there's never been anything like this before, because we haven't been worried about a guy having to get into the United States, especially during this time where, because of the president that is in office, things are a little bit more difficult when it comes to getting a work visa and all that kind of stuff. And then when you talk about, just him getting, becoming eligible to play for the NCAA, now we're waiting that out, and we have no clue how long it's going to take. I think some of us Tar Heel fans are probably a little scarred by the last time that the NCAA had to make a decision on one of our student athletes. That was, the most notable. There might be some others in other sports that have gone a little more smoothly. The last time that we had to deal with something like this was Tez Walker. He wasn't cleared until the third or fourth week of the season for Carolina a couple of years ago. And so that's what I think maybe has people a little bit concerned about this recruitment more than some of the other ones from previous transfers. But I don't know if it's necessarily amongst the biggest ones that Carolina has had. I just think it's probably the one that has been covered the most because of all the different elements that go into it.
I think what's really interesting when you look at him is, I think Vasar is maybe the guy that there's a lot more inherited pressure on, because Carolina needed to get a big man. And, he was the first big man that they went after in the portal, and they were able to secure him. But, as much as there was a void for a big man when we got into the offseason, there was definitely a void for what Luka Bogavac can provide for Carolina as well. And so, when you kind of look at who has more pressure upon them, I think you could probably list them 1A, 1B, because Carolina needs both of them to play at a really high level for them to be the type of team that we want them to be, and what Hubert Davis needs them to be to secure his status as Carolina's head coach moving forward. So it's going – I think it's going to be really intriguing to see how they kind of both handle that. With Harrison Ingram, there was so much pressure on him because it was very easy to identify when Carolina brought him in that if he hit, you knew Carolina was going to be good just because of what he brought to the table, the way he connected Carolina on both ends of the floor. Of course, he did hit was, I think he exceeded all of our expectations to the point where was only here for 1 year, was only here 1 year as a transfer, but feels like a lifelong Carolina basketball player. I think both of these guys can kind of have that same impact if they play at a high level, because we as fans were starved for what these two guys could bring to the roster. They saw legitimate size, rebounding. I saw David Sisk put up some film of him of the way he was used at Arizona offensively as a screener. I really hope Hubert Davis implements that into Carolina's half-court stuff, because pretty much when he got the ball inside the painted area, he scored, finished at the rim on 70% of his opportunities. And then Luka Bogavac is the wing scorer. It's the ability to create offense for himself, generate his own shot, can score at all three levels, at the rim, in the mid-range, and from behind the three-point line. And so I think there's going to be a lot of fanfare around him if he plays at a high level. And I think for him, this is a new age of Carolina basketball, because this is not just a one-time thing. If Hubert Davis is going to be this program's head coach for the next 10 to 15 years, and that's what all of us, I believe, are hoping for and rooting for, Carolina is going to be a factor on the international recruiting scene moving forward. We've talked about it a lot this summer. I don't think it's going to get to the point where it's going to be like Illinois, where they're filling out an entire roster of international pros, but I could see them looking to add 1 to 2 guys of significance every year, or at least every other year. It'll make it easier for Carolina to sell themselves internationally if Luca comes to Carolina and balls out in a big way. And we're all hoping for that. We're all rooting for that. And, I think he'll be a guy, as much as any newcomer that's on this roster, will be intrigued to see how he looks in the preseason exhibitions against BYU before we get into regular season competition. Let's now get to the other thing that I wanted to tackle tonight, because when trying to figure out how to put together the podcast, it was, well, do we do the roster and then do we do what if, or do we just do the roster as just a short, brief episode? But some audio came across my feed. I found it yesterday. I want to talk about it today. And that was Bomani Jones. If you watch ESPN, you've seen him at some point, because he was at the mothership for quite some time, had his own HBO show as well. But if you're a sports talk listener from the Triangle dating back, he did used to have a sports talk show in the Triangle. So very familiar with Carolina fans, how passionate they are, what Carolina basketball means to this region, to this state. And so he joined Joey Powell on a special Inside Carolina Basketball edition. And really the first thing they tackled was just the state of the program. And he addressed, been very much aware of the up and down nature that Carolina has been on under Hubert Davis. This has not been a guy that left the Triangle and, quit caring about the connections to college basketball, which I think is very cool, because most people, when they leave our area, they don't follow college basketball because it's a regional state. And so it's about 1 minute, 15 seconds here. But here's what Bomani Jones had to say about Hubert Davis's current fit as the head coach of the Tar Heels.
The job became open because Roy Williams seemed to very clearly look around and realize he didn't need to do this anymore, and he was not going to do it. Yeah. Even with that being transparently obvious on its face, and with Hubert having been an assistant for 8 years, I think it was 8 years that he was an assistant, that he was there
8 or 9, long enough.
To witness all the changes. The job now still is not the job that he thought that he was taking. Look, man, and I'm not saying this with any shade, it's just the truth. Hubert Davis did not take that job thinking that we live in a world where Armando Bacot would be rich.
Yeah.
Like rich. I would never pay for his food if we went out, right? And I'm 44 years old. I'd never pay for his food. That is not that. The set of circumstances that allow that to happen for him or anybody else has now made coaching college basketball something that I barely recognize. And knowing what we know about the things that are important to Hubert, this has become he was a good fit for the program in terms of lineage and everything else, but now he's an odd fit for the job in terms of like how things have changed since he took it, and he only took it 4 years ago. Like, how crazy is that?
All right, so Some very interesting things there that I took away from that soundbite. Obviously, the main part being the job is not the job that Hubert Davis signed up for when he was handpicked, hand selected by Roy Williams to be the successor and the caretaker of Carolina basketball. We had a chance to talk to Matt Doherty. It's now been, I think, 6 years ago. We had a chance to interview him and talk about his experience at Carolina. That was very brief and stint because there just wasn't enough winning. When he's been very open about his time at Carolina's head coach and what went wrong, he said the job was not the job that I signed up for, that I thought I was getting myself into. Of course, that was 20-something years ago. NIL, transfer portal, revenue sharing was not even something that was even being thought about, but that's something that when Hubert Davis got hired was on the precipice. We knew that the transfer portal was about to become the way that you rebuilt your roster. We knew that NIL was something that was very much on the doorstep of becoming possible, along with revenue sharing. So what do you make of Bomani Jones saying that the job that Hubert Davis signed up for is not the job that he thought he was inheriting, albeit though him being the right fit for Carolina off the court, just not being the right fit on it?
I don't think he's 100% wrong in terms of him being a little bit shocked by where the game has gotten to. I think we all are. I think we all are kind of shocked that things have taken off this quickly and that you've got NIL, the type of money that's been rolling in during the last few years. It seems to increase every single year, the amount of money that you have to have in order to put together a roster. Now you've got revenue sharing that's going to be added on top of that. And we've learned now that revenue sharing is literally just an add-on. It is not going to eliminate NIL in any way. The college commission that they had in place to sort of regulate the NIL stuff is already being pretty much shifted around to where NIL is still going to be just as big of a part of what you do as the revenue sharing. So I think no one could have imagined that it would get to where it is now. I mean, $14 million for this year's roster. And that price tag's probably going to go up in the next few years. It's crazy to think that we've gotten to that point already where the guys that you are coaching, you're going to eventually get to a point that the guys that you are coaching are going to make more money than you are. It's going to be a stunning reality for a lot of these coaches. And I don't think that's exactly what Hubert Davis signed up for. I think Hubert thought that he was getting into a game that was progressing towards being able to pay players, but I don't think he thought it would become what it has become. Now, does that mean that he is the wrong guy? I think it depends on how he adjusts to it. And I think now we're starting to see whether or not he's going to adjust to it. We are in the crucial year for Hubert Davis because now you've got Jim Tanner as your GM. So now that they've gotten on board with that, I think it makes a lot of sense that he's going to be adjusting. He's going to have to make that adjustment. And he's been adjusting really this whole time. But I still think, it doesn't change my opinion. I still think he's the right guy for this program right now. I still believe that with the GM in place, Carolina is going to be able to win. And I believe that when we're sitting here talking about this time next year, Hubert Davis will still be the head coach of the Tar Heels, and we will feel much, much better about where this program is at. But yeah, I don't think Bomani is that far off in saying that he took a job thinking it was one thing and we've gotten to a little bit of a different place.
Yeah, what's really wild about where we're at and where Carolina is at is, if you remember, Carolina was at the forefront of the NIL initiative. Like, they were one of the first programs to have something in place ready to go when NIL became legal, but was pretty much passed overnight because I think they were kind of caught off guard by just how much money it was going to take. I think we all thought that there would be a little bit of funding, and then you just had, billionaires and corporations that with ties to their schools. I mean, just, giving these programs empty checks or blank checks like at Texas Tech, what you've seen with St. John's, where, you've got guys that are running multi-billion-dollar organizations, tell them whatever you need, I got you. I think Carolina they weren't prepared for that. And so, yes, while they were at the forefront for what they thought NIL was going to be, because it went to a different level, that's why Carolina has been playing catch up. I think the biggest thing about what has made Hubert Davis, and I think what has made it easier for, I think, Carolina fans to put up with the inconsistencies, is he's not turned over the apple cart. When you really look at what failed Matt Doherty as Carolina's head coach, we can lament all the losing and talk about that playing a role. The guy lost 36 games in 2 years. That just doesn't happen here. Should not happen here. It should take, 4 to 5 years to lose 36 games. The guy did it in 2. There was a reason for on-court performance for him to get terminated. But look at all the changes he made off the court that in some of the areas that just made Carolina basketball not feel like Carolina basketball. And they're very subtle changes, but it was, changing over the secretaries, changing. And this is something that, he told me directly. If I could have gone back, I would have never done that, because it was just too much change from after you went from Dean Smith, Bill Guthridge, an extension of Dean Smith, to now this young head coach that felt that he had to try to prove himself while also being micromanaged. And I think it's something that we don't really talk a lot about when we talk about his time. He was set up to fail from the moment he got hired. Like when he was offered the job, Dean Smith literally told him, if you don't take the job, I'm going to give it to Rick Majerus. And so all of a sudden you have this young one-year head coach at Notre Dame stepping into the pressure-packed job that is Carolina. He was never going to succeed anyway because he knew that he wasn't wanted. He was trying to make it, but was being told, you got to run it your way. But when he did it, it was being criticized. But as far as to my knowledge, that has not happened with Roy Williams. I think Roy Williams is there for Hubert Davis. He's an advocate for Hubert Davis, but has let Hubert Davis run the program the way that Hubert Davis sees fit. And we've seen some subtle changes to the way that Carolina does things, primarily on senior night, where there's no longer the speeches that I think as those of us as fans that grew up watching the guys talk to the fans after their final home game on the Smith Center. Maybe we missed that, but that's not something that Hubert Davis wants to do. But from the most part, Carolina basketball still feels like Carolina basketball off the court. We want to win on the court. No, there's no doubt about it. But it still feels special. There's still the connection that we have as fans to a program that means so much. I think the biggest thing is what you mentioned, and I think that's the arrival of Jim Tanner. I think for someone that's not going to have really any say in terms of what they do in practice, what they do in the games, he was the biggest addition, I think, for Hubert Davis this offseason. Because Hubert quite literally told us last year on the radio show, he was not comfortable doing all the crap that comes with leading a college program in this era, where you've got to generate revenue, raise funding, while also re-recruiting your roster, recruiting the transfer portal, and doing the high school stuff. He wants to coach basketball. Well, now with a GM in place, with their front office in place, guess what Hubert Davis can do? Hubert Davis can coach. And that's something that I have never questioned as much as I've questioned other things. Do we want him to develop a rotation better? Absolutely. Could they do some things a little bit better in terms of execution? Absolutely. You don't go to a national title game as an 8 seed by accident. You don't win an ACC regular season title and win 29 games and be a 1 seed by accident. When he doesn't have to worry about all the extracurriculars and he can just be, in the gym, in the film room with his guys coaching, Hubert Davis can do that. And I think that's why they're poised and set up to have success, is because now he can just do the one thing that he wants to do, which is coach. And he has other people now in place to really take care of the extra stuff. And so I do think that'll make it easier for him to where he'll feel like a guy that is very much the right man for the job on and off the court in the current climate. We got a comment here on our YouTube page from Clint Moses who says, love Bomani, but who the hell is a coach that fits the NIL era? If he named one guy, I respect his opinion more. And I think that's a really good point, is that, Bomani did say he doesn't feel like an obvious fit, but there isn't an obvious fit because all these coaches are learning how to adapt to the current climate. Some have done so in a much better way than Carolina has, than what Hubert Davis has. But I can't tell you that Wes Miller would be a better fit for to lead the program right now as opposed to Hubert Davis. I felt like that when the job came open. I can't say that now with what he's done at Cincinnati. And look at some of the other guys that have ties to Carolina and mid-major schools. They'd be overwhelmed with just the demand and pressure of expectation. And so I know it's really hard to do. And we kind of talked about this during the What If series. We talked about, Dean Smith kind of adjusting, becoming a head coach at Carolina. There needs to be an adjustment period and a grace period for Hubert Davis to acclimate to the job because he's never been a head coach before. And unfortunately, he took over a program that has the highest expectations of any in the sport. And his first year became a rebound away from winning a national championship.
I mean, the answer to the question is somebody that is not a part of the Carolina family. That's the answer to the question, and that would be something that you wouldn't want to hear. Certain Tar Heel fans would not want to hear. I'm one of those guys because what he would be hinting at is they go out and hire someone like Nate Oates. I hate Nate Oates. I could not stand him being my head coach. They are a lot of people that would want to go hire Jay Wright. Problem with Jay Wright is he a guy that's going to adapt to this era? He didn't want to adapt at Villanova. That's the reason that he left. So, I mean, look, there aren't a ton of great names out there, but you would be looking at the coaches that have had the most success during this era. And to me, that's not something I'm interested in. I don't think that going outside the family is the right move, especially after just one failed hire. If this was to fail, I've said that multiple times. I still think that you need the blessing from Roy Williams. If Roy is willing to give you that blessing to go outside the family, then fine. If not, then you're going to stick with the family. You're going to listen to what Roy Williams says because this is his program more than anybody else's. So I think that's the crossroads that Carolina is eventually going to be at. That's why the best thing for this university is that Hubert Davis comes out and succeeds. And now he is set up to where he should be able to succeed. If he doesn't, then yes, it is time to have the conversation about whether or not he needs to go. But, I mean, to me, there's no argument that suggests that there is a better option for Carolina than him succeeding, continuing what has been a very successful structure that was built by Dean Smith, and Carolina continuing to be successful. Do I know that that's going to happen for sure? I don't, but it's what I'm praying happens over the next year or so, and that we're sitting here talking this time next year, not about his job security, but about where he ranks among some of the best coaches in college basketball.
Yeah, because, we talked about this earlier this summer. The anti-Hubert sentiment is like it's bigger than I realized and probably bigger than I wanted to feed into. We went to when the PGA was in town. We were at the PGA Championship, got mixed up with a couple of Carolina fans, spent 10 to 15 minutes them telling us why Hubert Davis sucked and why he needed to be fired. We were at the Panthers preseason game last Friday. Happened to run into a listener, not to the podcast, I don't think, but listens to us on the station, knows we're Carolina fans. And he spent 10 minutes telling us why Hubert Davis sucks and why they need to go outside the family. And so, I do think that, if we ever got to that point, we would sit here and have the conversation about what does Carolina need to do? Do they need to adapt? Do they need to go in a different direction? I don't think we're there yet. I think this year is going to be a big year for where that conversation goes. Because if Hubert Davis does not win 25 plus games, does not win, if he doesn't win an NCAA tournament game, there's a legitimate chance he's not back. If he doesn't make the second weekend with a $14 million roster, there's going to be pressure from not just the outsiders, from like the fans, but from the people that funded that roster for them to go in a different direction. But there's still not a clear-cut answer from within the family. As much as I could, as much as I loved Wes Miller 4 years ago, I can't tout a guy that's not made a tournament at Cincinnati, a program that should be in the tournament just about every year. And if we want to talk about Nate Oates and be brutally honest, the guy wasn't going to leave Alabama for Kentucky. If you're not leaving Alabama for Kentucky, you're not leaving Alabama for Carolina. Even though I think Carolina's a better job than Kentucky, that in his eyes that would just be just as much as a lateral program. He would not. So that's not even an option. Jay Wright, take away what happened in 2016. He's 4 years removed from coaching. I think he's settled into his life working on television, getting paid quite handsome to work a third of the year, as opposed to having to work every single day of his life. So that's why it's not just from a family perspective, but an outside the family perspective. That's why it is in the interest for Hubert Davis to win and succeed and really quiet the noise and the detractors. And we can just spend the next 10 to 15 years enjoying him. And maybe by then, Wes Miller's ready to come home, or Marcus Page has been groomed to become the next guy to stand in line and lead the program into the next generation. So I do think Bomani brought up some really good points, but I do think Carolina has done what they needed to do to put their head coach in the best position possible to win on the basketball court, which is ultimately the thing we care about the most, and something that we, believe it or not, because it's already mid-August, we're just 6 weeks away from practice opening up. We're just a little over 2 months away from that first exhibition, and pretty soon we'll be, getting to know this team, learn a lot about this team, and see what this upcoming season has in store. We can't wait to see how this season will ultimately play out. That's going to wrap it up for this edition of the Four Corners Podcast. In the meantime, guys, we will direct you guys to the website. That's HeelToughBlog.com. We're in full preseason football mode. Position previews for offense, defense is up on the website. Go and read about both sides of the ball for the upcoming football season. Bill Belichick met with the media earlier this week. Anthony wrote about that press conference as well. Go and check that out if you would like. On the basketball side of things, keeping you up to date with anything regarding the current state of the program, or recruiting, which is starting to pick up in a big way with prospects setting recruiting visits and dates of when they'll be on campus. And September is going to be a big month for Carolina in that department. We just encourage you to go to the website every single day, HeelToughBlog.com, your home for the best coverage of Carolina basketball and Tar Heel football. As for the podcast, you guys know where to find us. Every major podcasting platform. Simply search the Four Corners Podcast. We will pop up there. We encourage you guys to rate, review, and subscribe. That way you do not miss a single edition of the show throughout the remainder of the basketball off season. Well, with that, guys, it is going to wrap up this edition of the show. I do thank Anthony once again for hosting with me. We want to thank you guys for watching and listening. And as always, go Tar Heels.